I remember I was in Vietnam at the time and I pressed the send button on the email and opened the cart and
Open
went to
cart.
bed. Yeah.
Isn't that just that's like the woo, like, oh my God, what the hell's going to happen when you
Oh,
hit that
yeah.
open cart anymore? Yes.
And I went to bed because it was super late where I was. And I woke up the next morning and I had made $10,000. And I was like, what the fuck just happened?
The Perspective Podcast is fuel for your mind and creative grind. Each week, we break down the art of healthy hustling, overcoming the inner critic, and growing your creative business.
PC family, today we have back on Lauren Hom for round 2 of the Perspective Podcast. Welcome back. How are you doing today?
Hello, I'm doing good. Excited to be back.
It's great to have you back. So for those who want to do a deep dive and get to know more about Lauren, go back to episode 75. And this is like 170, so over 100 episodes ago. So yeah, go really get to know her because we're going to dive right into the meat. That's at perspective-collective.com/75. So for those who somehow don't know in this creative community or they're a new listener, give us the skinny on who you are, what you do, and most importantly, why people should care, because that's that marketing business tactic I really want to drive home with people.
Ooh. Hello, person unfamiliar with my work. My name is Lauren Hom. I'm a former advertising art director turned lettering artist. I go by the name Hom Sweet Hom pretty much everywhere on the internet. And yeah, I do commercial hand lettering. I teach online classes about lettering and creative marketing. And I am a self-proclaimed passion project person. That's probably the word I associate the most with my name. But I built my career by making personal work and then figuring out a system to churn out these personal projects that kind of checked the box of creatively satiating, but also beneficial to my career, and kind of found that sweet spot. And that's what I continue to do and teach others to do now too.
See, my friends, that's an elevator pitch. That sums it up right there. We were kind of briefly talking about, before we got on, just the balancing of the creative hat as well as the business marketing hat. And I think you do such an incredible job with it. And that's why people are attracted to you, because they want to learn how to do it too. You made a name for yourself building personal projects from passion. That immediately is hard not to be oh shit, I want to do that too. I would like to dive, for those just tuning in, this is the whole premise of this episode, is how to balance those two. Because a lot of people are like, man, I feel like I have to do freelance, but there's some other things they want to do on the side, and maybe freelance is holding them back for pursuing these other routes. So I would like to hear kind of your story about how you focused on either building, or how you fell into it, building your personal brand and finding your voice and your style, and then attracting clients along the way, or how did this all happen? Describe how this balance happened.
Wow. Okay, let me take it back. Well, for me, I always tell people I'm an accidental lettering artist. I went to school for advertising. I thought I wanted to be a creative director at an ad agency for a long time. And while I was in school, I went to the School of Visual Arts. We had to take a couple mandatory design classes and type classes. I took my first intro to typography class, and one of our first assignments was to draw letters real big, and I completely fell in love with it, and I had a knack for it. I was finished. It's like when you're a kid and you finish the math test first. It was the same thing with this, and I continued to have teachers outside of the ad program be like, hey, have you thought about design? And I just kind of brushed it aside because I was so laser focused on this goal I had set of I want to work in advertising. So did that, and I never stopped pursuing lettering, though. I always found my way back to it. I would try to incorporate it into my ad campaigns and any design projects. And as some of you who have been following my work for a while know, I got my big break. In 2012, I started a passion project just for fun. I was lettering little white lies that my roommates and I would tell ourselves, innocent stuff calories don't count on the weekend, or I'll be there in 5 minutes. And it just caught this wave of the internet and took off and started getting featured. I will say that my advertising background had primed me for this. Little did I know, because my brain was trained to think in campaigns, that's exactly what I did for this project. I gave it a name. So the name was Daily Dishonesty. I made a separate Tumblr blog for it, so it had its own place to live. All the colors were cohesive. I kind of branded this little project and sent it out into the world. And the way I packaged it up, plus the idea, it was just so easy to share. You could get it right away. You could share it with people who would think it was funny. You'd obviously have no incentive to share it with anyone who didn't think it was funny. And it just caught this wind, and it catapulted me into features on design blogs, and that led to a book deal, and that clout from the book deal probably led to getting more freelance work as a lettering artist. And keep in mind that before Daily Dishonesty, the kind of freelance work I was doing was like gigs off of Craigslist. I was just trying to freelance as a student for experience, I suppose, but I had no idea what exactly I wanted to do. And I had never even entertained the idea of doing design full-time as a freelancer anytime soon. And Daily Dishonesty basically catapulted me into the spotlight, and then all these inquiries started pouring in. And just over the next year or two, I graduated, got my first job in advertising, but this lettering momentum that I had built never stopped. And then I quit my job after a while because I realized, hey, I could give this lettering thing a try. Like, I could always go back to the ad industry if this just doesn't work out. Like, the worst case scenario is that I just go back. And so I followed my gut and did freelance. But like you mentioned, once I became an established freelancer, I then, the same way that I kind of moved from the ad industry to the lettering industry, new stuff is coming into your orbit all the time. And so teaching was a thing that kind of came into my orbit through a chance encounter with someone who worked at Skillshare, led to my first Skillshare class, which then kind of led to more teaching, in-person workshops, and then online workshops. And now my business is pretty much split down the middle. I'd say 40% freelance work, 40% teaching. And I've been trying to figure out how to divide my time between the two as an artist and also as a business person, because it would be naive of me to say that like one matters so much more than the other, especially you and I are around the same age. Like you're building your financial health, and you're supporting your family and all this stuff. So both of them matter.
So I think immediately you said something huge. So many people that I talk to is like, I got to do freelance. That's the only way to get clout. That's the only way to get respect. That's the only way to pave my own path to do full-time me. That's the dream that I see all these other people doing with these massive followings, crushing it for like the biggest clients. Like, I want to be the next Lauren Hom or Eric Marinovich or the Lincoln Design. And you kind of already said, like, it didn't stem from you seeking that work. You focused on yourself. You created work that was true to yourself, and that attracted work. And I think that's like pretty much the biggest takeaway. I think we could probably just call the show done right now, but like, you did a project that was for you, and you added marketing tactics to it, and that attracted the work. You weren't going into this project being like, how can I get freelance from this? Maybe you were, but it didn't sound like that.
It was a happy side effect, I like to say. And
it's a byproduct, yeah.
As things
happy
progressed,
side effect. That sounds more fun though.
than byproduct. When I think of byproduct, I think of like meat byproduct.
It sounds corporate. I'm from the corporate world for a little bit, so.
I was going to say that, I always, whenever people ask me like what my favorite project I've ever done is, I always go back to that one because it was the most innocent. Like, I realized after what happened with Daily Dishonesty, the power of series of personal work. And so I kept doing that in different ways and have used it as a career tool, to attract a specific kind of freelance work or to move closer to this kind of niche or topic. I do that now, but I didn't know any of that at the beginning. And it was honestly like my most, I guess, authentic project. But yeah, similar to what you said, I came into the lettering world and the freelance world thinking that client work was the only way and the only goal, until, like, it's funny when you said like, I want to be the next Lauren Hom, because I get so bashful, because for the longest time, my goal was to be the next Jessica Hish. Like, that was the bar that was set. And I'm like, wow, she, is doing all this cool client work. She's speaking at conferences. She has her own studio. And yeah, and once I got into once I kind of broke in and started doing client work, it's great. And it definitely strokes your ego to get the big clients. And of course, some projects have really great budgets. But at the same time, I realized I was like, oh, wait, I'm still beholden to the client. I'm still a hired hand. And there is only so much client work I can do as well, or want to do. If I want to make more money, I can either increase my rates or I can take on more projects, but that means more time.
So as you're building up the client, there's something behind the scenes, I'm sure. You got the marketing brain and stuff too. You're growing an audience. People are loving you, loving your work, but describe this teaching aspect then, because that comes in the form of basically teaching is the form of just serving your audience. And for you, did you start noticing like patterns or repeating themes of questions or same struggles that people are, oh, you're good.
Sorry.
Same patterns or same repeating struggles that people are like telling you within your work? Is that how you started being like, okay, these are areas I feel qualified to teach in? Like, where did this come from? Like the first Skillshare, and then how has it transformed from there? Because you're not only doing, you said 40% freelance. Did you say the other 60% is then teaching?
40 freelance, 40 teaching, 20 mixed, speaking, workshops.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I still want to throw that into the mix too, because outside of just freelance, what are other things people can do? And speaking, that comes with growing an audience and things like that. So the teaching side of things, how did that come about and growing or listening to the audience? Was that pretty much the key, is listening?
The same way I got into teaching, it's very similar to how I got into freelancing. Like, I didn't have a plan. I wish I could say I was, smart and strategic and had a plan. It all just kind of lent itself to the next thing. So I first came in contact with Skillshare because I was working on a passion project called Will Letter for Lunch, where I was passing out flyers to restaurants looking for chalkboard lettering work. And one day I went to go pass them out at like a weekend food fair that happened. And I gave one to a vendor who turned out to be the CEO of Skillshare, which is so ridiculous. But anyways, they had been looking for someone to do a chalkboard lettering class, and I fell in their lap and I said yes, even though I had never taught before. And that was my first kind of intro into teaching, and I really liked it. And the feedback I got from the class was really great. And I look at it now and I'm like, I didn't know anything, but I tried and I put myself out there and it helped some people, and that's great. And the way that I figured out what I was going to teach from there was, like you said, I had an idea of what people were asking me, in comments and in DMs and emails. But at the same time, too, what the data showed me was that people knew me as a lettering artist and I should probably teach lettering, and people had lettering questions. But my gut told me that, hey, I think I'd actually be more excited to talk about passion projects and creativity and marketing right now. This was at the end of 2016, I believe. And so I ended up hiring a business coach who was a friend of mine, and she kind of helped me work through it. And I told her, I was like, well, I feel like I should do a lettering class. It makes so much sense. And she was like, well, is that what you want to do? And I was like, yeah, I guess so. And she's like, do people ask you about passion projects? And I'm like, yeah, people ask me how I built my career all the time. Maybe they don't ask about passion projects specifically, but I'd feel more excited to talk about that. And I didn't do any, testing or surveys. Like, I just kind of went for it. And in hindsight, it could have been super risky, but I'll get a little bit woo. Yeah, I'll get a little bit woo-woo here.
The gut intuition, it knows. That's what we preach all the time. Logic keeps you safe.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. And oh man, I can't wait to talk about this later in the episode too, because logic has crept in so much more the further I progress in my business, because it feels like there's more to lose. Therefore, there's less room for like trying new things. And anyways, so back to the passion project thing, I ended up, writing a curriculum, breaking down my process. And it was easy for me because I had done 6 passion projects by that time. So I knew what I was talking about. It felt easy to me. And I realized, because I kept getting questions about, how do I build my creative career? If this was something that came easy to me because of my background, like, it had to be teachable to somebody else as well. And So I put it together. I didn't announce it or anything. And I basically just put it out there. And I had been freelancing for almost 5 years at this point, maybe 4.5. And didn't know how people would respond. I, had a very small email list, maybe a couple thousand people, because no one told me about email marketing as a freelancer.
I want to talk about that too as a channel that you're building. I want to talk about all these different streams outside of just freelance. This is gold.
Yeah. And so I put this class out there, called Passion to Paid. Obviously, it had all of me sprinkled around it, the name and the branding. And I put it out there. And I remember thinking, okay, I probably invested $5,000, maybe a little bit more in my business coach and filming the class, like in, putting it together. I don't think I'm counting my time here, but I was like, as long as I can make my money back, it'll be worth it. Because with Skillshare, they produced the whole thing for me, and that was really great. But I was like, okay, well, it'll be a good learning experience no matter what. And the, enrollment was going to be open for 7 days. I remember I was in Vietnam at the time, and I pressed the send button on the email and opened the cart and went to bed.
Yeah. Isn't that just that's like the woo, like, oh my God, what the hell's going to happen when you hit that open cart email? Yes.
And I went to bed because it was super late where I was. And I woke up the next morning and I had made $10,000. And I was like, what the fuck just happened? And the launch continued. And I think at the end of that launch, I had made $70,000. And I was like, I've never even booked a client project this big. Like, what just happened? I appreciate you talking
numbers. Thank you.
Oh yeah. I always like to be transparent. And this is why I'm such a big proponent too of, you got to try what works for you, because for the longest time, in terms of diversifying your income stream, I thought that maybe opening an online shop with prints and mugs and stuff was the next logical step.
Everybody says.
Totally.
People are like, client work. Okay. And then next, I think, from here, I should be doing my own shop. Those are the first 2 steps I did.
Oh, totally. And, I never went that route, but that was the only thing I had seen really modeled from the people I had been following. And I had heard from people too, at certain points, their shop was generating tens of thousands of dollars. And I'm sure if you're like an Aaron Draplin or like a Jessica Hish
or Lisa Congdon or Andy
totally.
J,
Absolutely. And so I think maybe because I had sold a couple of posters on Society 6, on my own, and didn't really make that much money from it. I had kind of written off posters as not my thing. And so because I had kind of checked that off, I think teaching was the next natural avenue for exploring what diversifying could look like. Because, okay, maybe, with lettering, it's tough because it's a phrase, it's on a specific product. And unless someone wants both of those specific things, maybe they like your work, but the product isn't necessarily for them. And with this class, I was so blown away because I didn't realize how many people wanted to learn from me. I thought I would sell, 20, 25 spots. The class was priced at $249. It was
Steal.
Thank you. This 10-week program, which I've condensed since then, because so many things, so much, there's only so much time in the day.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. And so when I saw that, I was like, okay, maybe teaching is my thing. Because I had been teaching in-person workshops just around lettering before that. And I really enjoy the human element. I love chatting with people. I like, interacting that way. And so that worked for me. And it kind of hit the sweet spot. And I continued to, from there, I got more strategic. I was like, okay, what should my next course be? I, looked more at the numbers and, asked people what they wanted, that kind of stuff.
When you say the numbers and the data,
Mm-hmm.
Where are you sourcing? It was for me, I have a Google sheet sourcing everybody's biggest struggle. And I can just create these buckets and pinpoint. So I know I'm not just throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks. I know I'm
good for you.
Targeted,
I'm not a spreadsheet person. I just go off of emails, DMs, comments.
Do you organize them or anything, or just have it in your head knowing shit, so many people talk about murals?
I just have it in my head. So I would say for me, the sweet spot is thinking about what stands out from, the hundreds of DMs and comments that are coming through, in the last 6 months. And because if it's coming through consistently enough, I'll think about it. And I'm sure eventually I'll have a spreadsheet where I can target specific
You get
things.
volumes more than I would get at the moment. I started in the beginning, so it's easier to maintain now. You know, there's a system, but like if you're getting 20, 50 DMs, emails, messages a day, that's a lot harder to maintain.
Oh yeah, it's been a struggle for me just to like you said, want to serve and like want to be helpful, but then set boundaries for your time, which is why classes are a great way to do that, because you can serve a large group of people at once with the same information without having to necessarily spend the same amount of time on each person. You can kind of, that's why I do Q&As too, or public Q&As on Instagram now, because 20 people probably have the same question. And if I can make one video, it can help a lot of people at once versus me writing the answer in a DM. That was something that I've done, I don't know, in the last 6 months that's been helpful.
That's a huge tip in itself. You know, if you get the same questions over and over again, build a resource or something for it.
Totally. Free, paid, whatever you want. Like, it's cool. Like, as a freelancer, as an entrepreneur, you get to figure out what you want to make and where you set your bar in terms of, here's what I want to offer for free value, here's what I want to charge for. Like, it's kind of the Wild West. Everyone's kind of just going off of their gut feeling. What was I going to say about the course? But yeah, I mean, from there, you asked me about how I keep track. Yeah, for me, it's a combination of what am I noticing people ask? And I try not to be on Instagram that much every day because it just is all consuming sometimes, just a constant stream of input. It's that coupled with what am I excited to teach? Like, that's one thing I've struggled with as a business owner with lots of different income streams is like, shoot, like I could make 20 different things right now. Which one is going to be the most profitable? Which one's going to be the most fun to do? What makes the most sense? And so I try to come at it with an intersection of that, of like, here's what I feel pumped to teach, that I feel knowledgeable about, that I, as a teacher, if you're not genuinely excited about the subject matter, like everyone remembers their like middle school or high school teachers who were jazzed about what they were teaching and those who were like just kind of there. I feel like that's the difference. And because a lot of what I teach is built off of, all the stuff that I've just done in my career naturally, it's easy for me to teach those things. It's like, how did I get started painting murals? I painted one in my house, or I just bought some big boards and started. I didn't wait for anyone to say, okay, now you can paint murals. It was the same thing with my passion project, Daily Dishonesty. It was like, haha, I have this idea. I'm going to make it. Like, the audacity of that 21-year-old me to just do that. But that's what has propelled my career forward every single time, is just feeling something or feeling drawn towards it and then doing it imperfectly.
That's great. Don't wait for permission. And earlier you said you got lucky when, you handed whatever to a Skillshare person and you attracted that job. But you just proved the fact that I try to preach is like luck favors action. If you're just sitting on the couch waiting for this opportunity to be delivered to your front door like a fresh, hot piping pizza, it just doesn't work that way. You have to take some level of action and being uncomfortable. Like when you get a feeling of discomfort for you, like how do you tell your brain to just shut up, logic? I'm going with my gut here. How do you just lean into that fear until it disappears? Like, were you even nervous about doing the will letter for lunch and just putting yourself out there? You're extroverted like me, so it's maybe a little bit easier from an introvert, but like these things that you want to do that are very uncomfortable, how do you get over the fear and just do it anyway?
I will say that I relied a lot on my naivete when I first started out. I definitely think that you can start a creative career anytime, but because I just happened to be 21 and more fearless, I think not even fearless. I guess I was fearless because I didn't know. Like,
no fucks given, basically, right?
Yeah. I wanted to do something. I didn't see why not. I had nothing to lose as well. Like, there was nothing on the line. It maybe felt a little bit more uncomfortable to, share personal work on the internet versus in a classroom like I was used to. But other than that, with the encouragement of my friends, it didn't seem like a big deal. And I think the way I see it is you build confidence slowly over time with action, like you said. And so by the time I got to Will Letter for Lunch, I was definitely nervous. Even though I'm an extrovert, I don't like cold approaching strangers. Like I don't even send
Same.
cold pitches as a freelancer. And with Will Letter for Lunch, I was so nervous going into businesses and pitching myself as like, hey, I'm a chalk lettering artist in the neighborhood, and I wanted to know if you need chalk lettering for your chalkboards. But every time I did it, it got a little bit less scary. Like it's
Just
like
normalized.
everything normalizes. I think that's one thing too I'd love to tell people is, for better or for worse, everything normalizes. If you take baby steps towards something that makes you uncomfortable, it'll get easier over time. It's like, learning to play the piano or being a runner. I hate running, but I know if I did it every day, a little bit more every day, I'm sure it would become easy.
It's like a muscle.
At some point. Exactly. It's just a muscle. And similar to a muscle, like you can also lose it if you don't practice it for a while. And I think for better or worse, it's like the stuff that scares you, you can practice getting good at it and it'll get less scary. What I ask myself a lot of times too is, I'm still a pretty logic driven person, like, but if you use that to your advantage, right? What's the worst that can happen? And the worst that can happen is, okay, I put myself out there, I hand out these flyers. It's 5 minutes of me feeling slightly nervous, the same way if I was introducing myself to someone at a party or something. That 5 minutes of discomfort for potential payoff of like, maybe these new doors will open, who knows? The worst case scenario is that they don't email me back. And with that in mind, I was like, oh, there's a no-brainer then. I should do this. That was the exact same logic I used when I was so nervous about quitting my job, whether it was the right or the wrong move. Was I completely decimating my career by leaving the ad industry, 9 months in? What if lettering didn't work out? But I used logic and I said, okay, I'm unhappy at my advertising job. If I don't do anything, I'll continue to stay unhappy at my advertising job. There's so much out of my control. If I try lettering and it doesn't work out, the worst thing that's going to happen, or like the next thing that's going to happen, is I burn through more of my savings than I'm comfortable with. I need to go back to advertising. I still have my resume. I can go get another ad job, maybe not at the same agency because that would be weird, but I still have my credentials. So if I try and fail, I'm back to where I started. And if I do nothing, I'm where I started. So it was a no-brainer to try. And this is where, again, my young age played to my advantage in terms of my confidence, because I was like, what's the difference between getting an entry-level ad job at 23 versus 24? It's like negligible. And I hadn't, cemented my roots in advertising quite yet. So I was lucky that I had flexibility, I guess, in that regard. And yeah, I just slowly built it up. I'm still building it up now. Like, people think I'm super confident all the time. Like you were saying earlier, like pressing open cart on, a new product or a thing you're launching feels so terrifying. But I think that creativity in itself is vulnerable. Like, even if you don't share it online, it's super vulnerable to like have the like audacity to sit down and draw something, or like to make something for fun. Like, it takes a lot of, I think, internal work to be even able to get to that point. So anyone who's baseline creative and making stuff, you've accomplished a lot. Really, trust me. As someone who just went through a bout of creative block, I now have a newfound appreciation for when I could just sit down and make stuff. But yeah, I think that when you practice making what you want and pursuing your own ideas, and then the next step is putting it out there, you start to build confidence, and then maybe you put it out there and then you do something like a Will Letter for Lunch, or you share it with someone, in your industry. Like, you keep inching towards those next levels of discomfort, and it gets easier over time. And one thing that my old business coach would ask me a lot of times when I was scared of something, or like we're, scenarioing out the worst case thing, was, she was like, okay, well, if that happens, will you survive? Will you be okay? And the answer was always yes. Because the things I was worrying about, of like, I remember we were talking about potentially doing Facebook ads for my courses someday. And I was like, I could never, like, the idea of, popping up in someone's Facebook feed and them leaving a mean comment because they don't know me. Like, I can't market to cold leads. I can only market to like my warm Instagram audience. And she was like, okay, well, if you got the mean comment, would you survive? And yeah, I would. And she also reminded me, everybody who's in my warm audience now, who like knows me and loves me, was cold at some point. that logic really helped me to get over, that hump of putting myself out there even more. And if it helps anyone too, like I still haven't run Facebook ads. I'm on my way.
Get on it. Get that back end ads manager.
I know.
My coach helped me and blew my mind. I'm like, wow, this is really intense and in depth with different audiences you could create. It's
wild.
Makes your head hurt a little bit. But this could be all fine and great. A lot of people are listening, or a lot of people who are in your audience, they're just finding their groove. They're trying to figure out what move they should even make or what their next step should be. And that's great. Like, I've been doing this for a long time. You've been doing this for a long time. You have an audience. I've been building an audience, but not everybody has that. And I think people are just looking where to start off. So people have this pressure to think they have to do freelance. And I want to encourage them, like, you don't. And I think you said it best. Like, you literally just gave 3 steps right here that I think are perfect for people trying to figure out their groove. Practice making what you want, pursue your ideas, and put it out there. Like, by doing those 3 things, consistently taking action over time, like, it's like planting seeds, and you never know which one's going to like pop off. Or I use that baseball reference too. And I believe maybe it's you too, but like, you need at bats. I think I heard it originally for Gary V. And the more at bats and up to the plates you get, the sooner you get to hitting that home run or something to blossom big time. So for those who are just starting, what are some tips for people to just start finding their voice? Like, if you were to redo it all again, you had no audience. How about I rephrase it like that? 0 foundation, you're going out into the world and just going to like start figuring it out again and creating content. What would you do?
Oh man. I mean, my gut answer is like, I would probably just do what I did before. Like, the way that I stumbled into my career was by making something that I wanted to make. And maybe because I was still a student and we were doing more self-initiated work, I don't know. But if I had no audience and I was going to start something, and this is actually something I've been thinking of,
and sprinkle in some of those like marketing tactics that you've learned along the way that you didn't know in the beginning, because I think that's what people are going to help grasp early,
Absolutely. Yeah. So of course, making what you want. So identifying what it is that you would want to make. And so I always use the lens of a passion project as like a tangible thing that I'm going to make with whatever inspiration or ideas that are circulating around in my mind. And so using the lens of a project, like, I unknowingly, because of my ad background, branded Daily Dishonesty as this, neatly packaged up project and then sent it out into the world as its own thing versus, I didn't even have Instagram at the time. That like wasn't a thing in 2012 for me, at least. Instead of just posting, the occasional one to my Instagram mixed in with all my other stuff, I package it up as its own thing. And so from a marketing standpoint for your own ideas, can you find something that you can make multiple pieces of that could live as its own little like mini gallery show or, collection that goes together, that not only is easier to market because people can see like, oh, there are multiple pieces under this one idea. It also makes a really great portfolio piece, whether or not you want to freelance. Like, the byproduct is probably that you're going to get some freelance.
You said byproduct.
Work. I know. The happy
side effect.
The happy side effect.
That's hilarious. You're corporate.
Oh no.
ROIs, GDP.
Oh man. But yeah, when you package it up, it shows other people too that like, hey, this person can think beyond just individual pieces. They can think in a series. They can, whether it means it's a campaign or whatnot, it's just beneficial, I think, to work in that format. That's what I've always naturally done. Of course, make one-off pieces when you feel like it. It's, your creativity, your life, do what you want. But in order to get the most like punch or the most juice for your squeeze, I always recommend packaging it up as its own project. And not every idea warrants its own website or it's a big, red carpet rollout. Some ideas are just smaller. But what I try to teach my students and what I do in my own life is like, okay, like, is this an idea that I can build out into a big thing? Is this more of just like a single Instagram post? And then I figure out, what do I feel like making? Do I have the bandwidth to do a big project right now? What schedule can I commit to updating this project? And so I think passion projects run the gamut of like a singular personal piece all the way to like almost like a new business, starting a whole series. Like a podcast is a passion project. Actually, that's a really great way to think about.
Changed my life as a passion project.
It's a really great way, because it's like, okay, there's this singular topic or the umbrella topic that we're going to be making one thing underneath. It's coming out consistently. Yeah. And that's honestly what I did with Daily Dishonesty too. So if I was starting from scratch now, I would still tap into my personal well of inspiration of what are things that are human and relatable, like things that I like, inside jokes, just almost like the little things in life that we don't pay that much attention to. I think those are the juiciest bits because they're relatable. Like, think about memes and how weird they are, but how I have never been so quick to send people stuff as when I see a meme that I know that they're going to love.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us feel that way. And not that you need to memify your creative work, but if you think about that format, it's like, where is that intersection between stuff that a lot of other people feel and stuff that I'm super into and stuff that I could, I always tell people, think of it as, what are those 6 categories that if you were a contestant on Jeopardy, what are the 6 categories you would love to show up where you would absolutely crush it?
Ooh,
those are your categories.
That's such a good analogy for how to find that secret sauce, that recipe.
Like, what are the things you know a ton about that you could talk forever about? Like, those are those good categories. And I have to thank my grandma because I watched so much Jeopardy growing up, and that's probably where that analogy comes from. But I always was on the edge of my seat as a kid, looking at when they announced the categories, seeing if there were any that I knew. And of course, there are some that you're I don't know anything about that. And some of them you're I would take every single question
category
in that
of bread.
category. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And so I think that would be my best advice. It's funny you asked that because I've been trying to think about that myself in terms of where my career is going to go. If I start lately, I've been thinking in the future, it would be really fun to do something with food, not in a lettering or a design way, but a food thing, like a food blog, or I don't know if I'd open a restaurant. I have no idea, but that's where my brain has been on the fringe, lingering. And I keep thinking but how the fuck would I start a food business? And I have to go back and tell myself, the exact same way that you started a lettering business from scratch. It's applicable to so many different areas, anything creative, especially creative, but probably other areas as well. And so I have to remind myself that everyone starts from scratch. I, again, wish I was this strategic and had this much foresight, but I didn't realize that by kicking my career off with a series of projects, Daily Dishonesty, Ex-Boyfriend Tears, We'll Letter for Lunch. Feel free to Google them if you don't know what I'm talking about. It's probably too much to explain here. But by starting with projects that were based around my personality, my interests, that set the foundation for not only freelance work to come in, but for fans to start forming. And I never really thought of myself that way until, my audience started growing and growing and growing. And I began, actually getting fans. And I was whoa, why do people feel this connection with my work? And I think it's because I built it from an authentic place. I try to be the same way I am in person as I am, or the same way I am online as I actually am in person. And
so important.
It's just it's the most frictionless way for me to exist, because it sounds so exhausting to have Instagram Lauren and then real me as well. But that's another tricky thing that I think a lot of, especially, sensitive artists like myself struggle with, is oh man, I have to have my digital version of myself now and my real self. And you're constantly worrying about how you're presenting in both areas and what's too much to share, what's not enough to share. And for me, it's always just been through the lens of my personality, my interests, and my work, and how do those things converge. And because I built my passion projects around my interests and my personality, when I went to sell my very first, course, Passion to Paid, the response, my agent likes to hypothesize that it's because I was sharing my work and sharing advice for so many years for free. That's because that's just what I thought I was supposed to do and what I wanted to do, what I felt naturally that's what I naturally gravitated towards. When I did finally have an offering, he was maybe people jumped on it because they were just excited to give you something back. And I never thought of it that way. But, you can get so much free information on the internet now. And I don't know if you feel this way, but I get overwhelmed, like information overwhelmed sometimes, getting advice from too many sources. And so I definitely have my handful of like people that I've picked over the years and continue to pick of like, this is going to be my go-to person for this thing or this thing. And if we can be that for other people, that's amazing.
I think you said a couple important things here. So people getting started and you feeling like you have to like monetize what you're doing right away. And the way to do that immediately is freelance. Like you're putting yourself in a position to just like burn out, hate what you're doing. And you said it beautifully. And I think it parallels exactly what I did. You build that foundation around your interests, motivational pizza related things were what I always loved. And ever since I was a kid, I was doing that kind of shit. And it shows up in my work today. And you just like give over time. And then when you have an offering, you've built this like, know, and trust factor. Like that's all it is with the audience. And people want to support you. Like people would buy stuff, not necessarily people I know bought my Procreate brushes and they don't even have a fucking iPad, So it just,
they just open the files on their computer and just kind of like look at them.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a really nice instruction PDF. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's building that foundation over time and showing up as yourself consistently and expressing yourself. I think those
100%.
are all like the key things that I didn't know when getting started. I think you kind of stumbled into it, but you still had that knack from like your advertising. I didn't have any of that. It's both just been an evolution over time. So, but other things you do too, like you do teaching. I want to just get these other ideas out there for people.
Mm-hmm.
So freelance isn't the only way, but so teaching, whether that's courses, that's what else?
In-person workshops.
In-person workshops,
Mm-hmm.
Those are options. Digital goods. So if you have people asking you over and over again, like, how can I use that same filter on these photos? You can kick out presets for people. You build resources. You provide so much value. I think in your newsletter or in your stories, you have these little blocks of just gold mines of value that you can direct people to. So I have a question. Here, go to this resource over here. Your homework. So you're finding all these different avenues outside of freelance, which I think is great. You have that 20% bucket. So if freelance went away, you still have 60% built up 2 allocations that you could do, like things like affiliates. I know you do affiliates for people as well. Maybe sponsorships, speaking. So there's so many different routes. Is there anything that I'm missing that you could like provide someone or ideas?
For me, those are the mains that you touched on. There are other people who license their artwork for, home goods or stationery or products. I don't do a ton of that. I think I've licensed all of 4 things in my entire career.
But you tried it to know if it was something that could become a channel of your business or not. Like you've tried a bunch of different shit. I've tried a bunch of different shit. And like freelance for me is only maybe 10 to 15% of my revenue now, so it's wild that, you have other things that make up more than your freelance, when I think some people see you and think you as like the freelance person.
Yeah, it is interesting. Like I was thinking back to a conversation where a friend was telling me that, I think they were selling t-shirts, but they weren't selling well. And they had gotten the idea to sell t-shirts because their friend was making a killing with t-shirts. And so they're like, we'll try that too. And it just didn't work for them. And I think that when you brought up the licensing thing of like, it wasn't quite my thing, I never actively pursued licensing. It's interesting because I naturally got approached for freelance after Daily Dishonesty, and I didn't have any control over that. It was like people saw my work and that's how they responded to it. I rarely have those 4 times I've licensed things. Those were people reaching out to me. I've never made an active pursuit to license. Maybe I could someday, but I feel like how I found my place in terms of how I diversified my income streams was started with one thing and then kept branching it. I was like, I'll try one more thing and one more thing, but also at the same time noticing what's just coming my way as well. Maybe if for some reason Daily Dishonesty spurred a stream of licensing deals, my career would look much different. But it's almost like, like right place, right time, like the thing that's within your control. And I know you've talked about this too, like the stuff that's within your control is all we can really worry about. Like my creative output, what am I making? What am I publishing? And opportunities will come. Like maybe if I hadn't have gone to that food fair and passed out my flyer, I wouldn't have done a Skillshare class, most likely not. And I wouldn't have kind of snowballed into doing more teaching. Maybe I would have found my way here through another channel eventually. But I always tell people too, like just if your gut says, yeah, that sounds kind of cool when an opportunity presents itself, why not give it a try? But we also know that before opportunities even present themselves, we have people we look up to who are examples of things already that we are like, that looks cool, I want to try that. So for me, it's been a combination of me actively pursuing things that I saw other people doing that looked cool, and then just seeing what comes my way. Because you really never know. I knew I wanted to do speaking eventually. And so that was always on my radar, probably because my favorite designers, John Contino, Jessica Hish, were doing speaking.
Same.
And that just seemed cool.
Yeah. So I like it. Be active, but also be open for like the universe to throw you a curveball that you didn't even see. I never thought I would do coaching. And now that's my business. Like I would have never saw that because I was so focused on freelance. So I like that. Stay active, pursue your interests, but also be open for opportunities to come your way.
Oh yeah. And also on the open front, like one thing that I had a hard time with, I don't know, 2 years ago, maybe after the first year of me teaching online courses and it like starting to work, I was having a struggle, an identity crisis of like, wait, but I'm a freelancer. Like if I take any time away from freelancing, I'm somehow less of a designer. Like I had so cemented my definition of what it meant to be a successful designer.
You gave yourself this identity.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And so be open to redefining what your career as a creative person might look like. It's been a journey for me because I think a lot of it honestly just boils down to like, what are other people going to think? And we all know that's not productive thinking. It's not a good way to live intuitively or authentically. But we're humans, we're social creatures. Of course, those are going to cross our minds sometimes. But the best things in my career have happened when I either haven't been thinking about what people are going to think or squash the thought and like get it out of my mind.
No, I love it. And real quick, while we're at it then, we've mentioned about passion to paid. What can people expect? I believe it's dropping today, potentially, as we talked beforehand.
Yeah, crazy timing.
Yeah. So like with that dropping today, what can people expect with that? Everything we just talked about, you're stuck and you're looking to kind of kick things off in the right way. Maybe you're not focused on freelance right now, but you want to really kick things off from that personal perspective with a passion project. What can people expect if they want to join what you're offering?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a big believer that passion projects are beneficial no matter what, even if you don't have a goal in mind. But yeah, Passion to Paid is basically this class that I've launched. I think this is the 6th time I've launched it, which is so wild. I basically teach it twice a year, and it is everything you need to know about how to come up with that like big idea and then turn it into a tangible project, package it up, market it, on social media, pitch it to different design blogs, like get it circulating, like you being the one kind of nudging things rather than having someone find you. And then the end of the course too is I want to give people who maybe haven't freelanced before but are interested in it. Like I basically walk you through, here are the basics you will need in case, what happened with me with Daily Dishonesty, right? Like I put this project out there, it caught wind, and then I had all these freelance inquiries coming in. I want to equip people with the tools to handle those inquiries if they start coming in. But I've had students use the class for launching blogs, for launching lines of products. Like it can really it's a really great starting place just to get your ideas on paper and figure out how to make them tangible and how you might want to put them out in the world.
So it's not just for visual artists who are letterers. It's not just for that.
That's the number one question I get is this a lettering class? Nope. I've had photographers, I've had illustrators, letterers, bloggers, like some people who own restaurants. Like I'd say primarily because I'm a visual artist, it speaks to visual artists, but I really do think the format can be used like, oh my gosh, I was actually just thinking about how the format that I teach to can be used just to like make social media content for a brand or for a person. And so
content creators.
Yeah, kind of like that. I know there's like a weird tension between like the term artist and content creator, but I think as artists in the digital age, we are kind of at the intersection. And so
I would call it the intersection too. You create art, but it's still content.
Yeah, it's so easy to shit on like the word content, but
like the traditional artists are the ones who are getting butthurt about that, you know? I've been fine tuning my oil painting, and this is not content, this is expressional art.
Yeah, I'm really interested in helping people who want to find that intersection of doing creative work that you like, but giving it that marketing edge of, oh shit, this is actually going to do something for my career and get me closer to where I want to go. So yeah, that is launching today. It is, it feels so weird to say today. I can't say it.
I know, right? It's been something I've had to learn how to do.
But yeah, I've had the pleasure of teaching over, 1,600 students now, which is so wild. But yeah, it's my favorite thing to teach. I teach a bunch of classes, but it's by far my most popular and my favorite because, I was going to say something earlier when you were saying about, what you're give in terms of what you're putting out online. There are certain things that feel easier to give for some people. Like you'll always have that friend who, is so generous, baking you cookies and sharing their food. Or you might have that friend who's really generous with their time and listens to you and is really empathetic. The things that you're naturally good at giving are the things you should lean into for your creative work. And that's what I hope to help people discover too. And in Passion to Paid, and just by following me on Instagram, is like, you don't have to do it all. Like, it sometimes feels like we have to solve all the problems and be helpful to everybody. But I'm a big fan of getting specific and like making a bigger impact with a smaller group of people.
Yes.
And then watching it spread from there. That's what
depth instead of casting a wide net, for sure.
That's what all my projects have done. And I'm really curious too, like in 10 years when I'm launching this class again, what other projects I might have made. Like, I'm so excited too, because this round of Passion to Paid is revamped from the previous ones. Like because I've been teaching it for 3 years, I have so much more stuff now that I can incorporate, and things that I've learned and new structures for projects that I've encountered. Like, for the very first time this year, I launched a passion project that wasn't just a series of images. That is what my passion projects normally are. I created a website called What the Fuck Should I Letter? WTFshouldIletter.com, based off of an insight that a lot of my audience has a hard time coming up with interesting stuff to letter. You asked earlier, how do you find your voice? And for me, it's always been through writing my own stuff, but a lot of artists don't think they're good writers, which I think is a block a lot of us have. So I created this site that it's just a phrase generator of weird stuff that you can letter. And it's the first time I made a project that was serving someone else instead of just being like eye candy or entertaining. And it's been really rewarding. But it's stuff like that I'm really excited to have worked into the curriculum, because the more I learn, like basically I can only teach my students as much as I know, as I've experienced. And so because I've been doing the class for 3 years, I felt like it was time for a little update, a little special sauce.
How many weeks or how much time should someone expect this to take? And you originally it was 10 weeks, but I don't feel it's that right now. Is it a work at your own pace? Is it like a 3 to 5 week?
It's work at your own pace. I feel like this is something we might have to add at the end, but I've been debating whether or not I should teach it live again. But the last couple of rounds have just been work at your own pace, because live stuff is tough for people to show up, and people feel like when they miss the first week, they're like off the bandwagon. It's like when you go to the gym for 7 days and then you miss the 8th day and then you're like, well, it's all over.
Right. Time to go smash this tub of ice cream.
Yeah.
Well, real quick, let's move on to a couple quick rapid fires.
Yeah.
Wrap it up, get you your time back. So I believe I asked you this before. If you're on death row, what would your last slice of pizza be? Have I asked you that? Was
you
that
asked me and I got fucking roasted for my answer.
Not by me.
I think by the internet, because it's justified. My answer is the wrong answer.
Veggie pizza, vegan pizza, what was it? Pineapple? Oh shit. Let people enjoy things.
It's pineapple.
Do not roast Lauren after, what is it?
It's pineapple. Yeah.
Oh, it's not for me. I pick it off. I try it here and there just to see if my flavors, my taste buds have like updated themselves. But it's still not for me. So that's still your jam?
It's tied to like my childhood. We used to order so much like Domino's, Hawaiian pizza, and I don't order it anymore. But Yeah, I think that's what it would be. Like there's a nostalgic element to it.
Do not roast Lauren after she just melted your face with fucking value today. So stop it if you're listening. The last one before people can follow you and support you online. Most important one. Do you believe in aliens or other life forms existing outside of our solar system?
Ooh, you know, such a shitty answer too. I've never really thought about it. I feel like I've spent all of 30 seconds ever thinking about that in my life. I'm going to go with I feel like it's the same answer I use for religion. I don't not think that they could exist. So like my answer leans towards yes. Like I'm agnostic. I didn't grow up in a religious household, and I've chosen agnostic because I don't have enough conviction to be an atheist. And so, yeah, I'm going to go with it's possible.
I feel that,
but I never think about it.
Fair response. A lot of people can relate to.
Okay, good. I'm trying to be honest.
Gold star. All right. Where can people go to follow you online and support you?
Ooh, so people can find me pretty much everywhere as Hom Sweet Hom. It's like Home Sweet Home without the E's in home, except for Twitter, but I'm never really on Twitter, so don't even worry about it. It's Hom Tweet Hom in case you're very active on Twitter for some reason. I lost the password to my Hom Sweet Hom Twitter, and so I had to make a new one.
That's hilarious.
Like so long that I didn't even remember any of the login details. Anyways, yeah, Hom Sweet Hom pretty much everywhere on the internet. I'm fairly active on Instagram. I run a weekly newsletter called Homwork. I got so fucking lucky with my last name. But similar to the What the Fuck Should I Letter project that I mentioned, if you are looking for a little bit of a jumping off point in terms of creating, it's every Friday I email out a different creative prompt to kind of get the creative juices flowing, give you some ideas. They're usually all related to helping you come out of your shell, find your voice, like market your work. And so I've been running that for almost 3 years now, which is so wild to me because I can't think of anything I've done consistently on like a week-to-week basis for 3 years.
That's a lot.
Yeah, but I'd say that's my main activity online.
I'll be sure to link all that in the show notes as well as a link to P2P.
Yeah.
I got you. Thank you so much for your time today. And let's make round 3 not take over 100 episodes later.
I can't believe it's been 100 episodes.
Oh,
yes,
all right.
That sounds great.
Have a good rest of your day. I appreciate you. Later.
Thanks. You too. Bye.
Thanks again for listening. It'd be awesome if you took the time to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and let the comment below so we can connect. Again, if you want to catch a shout out as a future listener of the week, make sure you subscribe to the show on iTunes and give it a rating and review.